Welcome to our deep dive into Brené Brown's Daring Greatly. I have a feeling this one is really going to resonate with you guys.
It always seems to, really hit home for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. And, imagine this. What if the key to unlocking a more courageous and fulfilling life wasn't about being tough, being strong and stoic, but it was actually about embracing vulnerability?
That's wild.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of what we're kind of taught, right?
Yeah.
And that's precisely the counterintuitive idea that Brené Brown explores in this book. And so today, that's what we're going to unpack.
Yeah.
Why vulnerability is so often misunderstood and how it can be a catalyst for positive change.
Yeah. It's interesting how Brown tackles this head on. Instead of shying away from vulnerability, she dives right into its very definition. Uncertainty, risk emotional exposure, all the things we tend to instinctively avoid.
It's scary.
But what if those moments like confessing your love or owning up to a mistake or asking for help weren't signs of weakness, but rather acts of immense courage?
Yeah, it's like flipping the script entirely.
Totally.
So if vulnerability is actually a form of courage, why do we find it so difficult to embrace? What makes us resist it so strongly?
I think a significant part of that resistance stems from shame, which Brown differentiates from guilt. Guilt tells us, I did something wrong, while shame whispers, I am wrong.
Oh, that's a good distinction.
And that feeling, I am wrong, that strikes at the core of our self-worth.
Yeah.
It's no wonder we build defenses to protect ourselves from that kind of pain.
Absolutely. So powerful, that distinction between guilt and shame. It makes you realize how deeply shame can impact our actions and choices. So how do we even recognize these defenses, these armors we build to shield ourselves?
Well, Brain outlines 3 primary ways that people try to armor up against vulnerability. The first is perfectionism.
Oh, yeah.
That constant striving for flawlessness as a way to earn worthiness, which ironically keeps us from being truly seen.
Right.
And then there's numbing, which you might recognize as those moments when you zone out with Netflix, bury yourself in work, or perhaps indulge a little too much.
Oh, yeah.
To avoid dealing with uncomfortable emotions.
Numbing, that's a familiar friend or perhaps foe for many of us.
Right.
Avoiding those tough feelings is so tempting, even if it means missing out on the fullness of life. What's the third armor?
The third armor is foreboding joy.
Foreboding joy.
That sneaky voice that pops up when things are going well, whispering, don't get too happy. Something bad is bound to happen. It's self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Driven by the fear of potential pain, and it robs us of fully experiencing joy.
Foreboding joy. That one hits close to home for me. It's almost like we're anticipating heartbreak before we even allow ourselves to fully embrace happiness. So we've got these armors, perfectionism, numbing, and foreboding joy, all designed to protect us from vulnerability and shame. But according to Brown, these very defenses prevent us from experiencing life wholeheartedly. How do we move beyond these self-imposed limitations? That's where Brown's concept of wholehearted living comes in. It's about shifting our perspective, not trying to earn our worthiness, but understanding that we are inherently worthy simply because we exist. From that foundation of worthiness, we can engage with life more authentically and courageously.
Okay, I'm already intrigued by this wholehearted living idea. But how do we practically apply this concept? How do we actually start living wholeheartedly?
Well, Brown identifies a few core components, and they all revolve around embracing vulnerability and combating shame.
I'm all ears.
Really?
Tell me more about these core components.
Firstly, practicing gratitude. It's about intentionally acknowledging and appreciating the good in our lives, both big and small. This helps to shift our focus away from scarcity and towards abundance.
Gratitude. That's a powerful practice. I can see how focusing on what we're grateful for can create a more positive and resilient mindset. What else is part of this wholehearted living approach?
Another crucial element is setting boundaries. It's about recognizing and honoring our own needs and limits, while respecting those of others. It means having the courage to say no when necessary and communicating those boundaries clearly and compassionately.
Setting boundaries can be tricky, though, especially when we're worried about disappointing others or damaging relationships.
Yeah.
But ultimately, healthy boundaries are essential for both personal well-being and strong relationships.
Yeah.
What else is key to living wholeheartedly?
Of course, embracing vulnerability itself. It's about showing up authentically, even when it feels scary. It's about having the courage to risk rejection, failure, and heartbreak in pursuit of meaningful connections and experiences.
That sounds both terrifying and incredibly liberating at the same time.
Yeah.
It makes you realize how much we miss out on when we try to protect ourselves from those risks. What's the final component of wholehearted living?
The final piece is nurturing resilience to shame. It's not about eliminating shame altogether because that's impossible. It's about learning to recognize shame when it shows up, developing healthy coping mechanisms to manage it, and cultivating self-compassion. Remember, shame is a universal human experience. It doesn't diminish your worth.
This wholehearted living concept is resonating with me deeply. It feels like a pathway to a richer, more authentic life. But I'm curious, in the sources you reviewed, did you notice any connections between vulnerability and leadership?
Oh, that's an excellent point. One of the fascinating aspects Brown explores is how these concepts of vulnerability and courage translate to the workplace, especially in leadership roles. We often associate leadership with, strength, decisiveness, and having all the answers.
Right.
But what if true leadership actually required vulnerability?
It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Why would a leader need to be vulnerable? Wouldn't that undermine their authority?
Think about the leaders you've admired most, the ones who truly inspired you. Were they the ones who pretended to be perfect, or were they the ones who were willing to acknowledge their mistakes, ask for help, and show their human side?
Now that you mention it, the leaders who had the most positive impact were the ones who weren't afraid to be vulnerable. They created a sense of trust and openness that made others feel safe to share their ideas and take risks.
Exactly. When leaders avoid vulnerability, they often create a culture of fear and anxiety, stifling creativity and innovation. On the other hand, when leaders model vulnerability, they foster psychological safety, encouraging collaboration, open communication, and a willingness to learn from mistakes.
So, what are some practical ways that leaders can embrace vulnerability in the workplace? How can they create that environment of psychological safety?
One of the most powerful things leaders can do is admit when they don't have all the answers. No one expects perfection, and attempting to maintain that facade is exhausting and unsustainable. It's far more authentic and relatable to acknowledge that you're still learning and growing, just like everyone else.
That's a great point. I can imagine it would be incredibly liberating for a team to know that their leader doesn't have all the answers, but is open to learning and growing alongside them. What else can leaders do to encourage vulnerability?
Being open to feedback, both positive and negative, is crucial. It demonstrates that you value your team's input and are committed to continuous improvement. It also reinforces that it's okay to not be perfect.
So it's about fostering a culture where feedback is seen as a gift, an opportunity to learn and grow rather than a threat. What other strategies did you find in the source material?
Another key strategy is celebrating failures as learning opportunities. This shifts the focus from blame and shame to growth and development, reframing failure as a stepping stone to success. It encourages experimentation and innovation without the fear of repercussions for making mistakes.
I can see how that would create a more dynamic and creative work environment. What about fostering healthy conflict and debate? Is there a role for vulnerability in that?
Absolutely. While it might seem counterintuitive, encouraging healthy conflict and debate can actually strengthen a team. When people feel safe to express their opinions, even when they differ from the leaders, it leads to more robust decision-making and innovative solutions.
So it's about creating a space where people feel comfortable disagreeing respectfully, knowing that their voices will be heard and valued even if they don't align with the majority. It's about moving away from a culture of yes men to a culture of open and honest dialogue.
Precisely. And that requires leaders to model that behavior themselves, to demonstrate that it's okay to disagree, to challenge assumptions, and to have passionate conversations while remaining respectful and focused on finding the best solutions.
This is fascinating. It seems like vulnerability isn't just about personal growth, it's also a critical element of effective leadership and building strong, resilient teams. But I'm also curious about the broader societal impact of embracing vulnerability. Does Brown touch on that at all?
That's a question I found myself pondering as well. What if this idea of vulnerability wasn't just about individuals or teams, but had implications for society as a whole? What if it held a key to bridging the divides we see in the world today?
I'm intrigued. How could vulnerability possibly address something as complex as societal division?
Consider this. When we're willing to be vulnerable, we're essentially saying, this is me, imperfections and all, I'm not perfect, and I don't expect you to be either. That kind of authenticity can be disarming, creating space for empathy and understanding.
It's like we're letting go of the need to be right all the time, choosing instead to connect on a human level, acknowledging our shared imperfections.
Exactly. And when we can do that, we can begin to dismantle the barriers that separate us and build bridges of understanding and compassion. We can start to see each other as fellow humans navigating the complexities of life rather than adversaries in a battle of ideologies.
It's a powerful idea.
Yeah.
But how do we move from this conceptual understanding of vulnerability's potential to actually cultivating more vulnerability in our daily lives. What are some tangible steps we can take to make this a reality? It's almost like we need a roadmap for navigating this whole vulnerability journey,
Yeah.
especially when it feels so daunting. What are some practical steps we can take to cultivate more vulnerability in our everyday lives?
Well, I think it all starts with cultivating self-compassion, treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a close friend.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we're all works in progress, perfectly imperfect,
Right.
deserving of love and acceptance even when we make mistakes. Self-compassion is so essential, isn't it? It's like giving ourselves permission to be human, to stumble and fall and get back up again without judgment. It creates that sense of safety and acceptance that makes vulnerability feel less threatening. What else can we do to cultivate vulnerability?
Finding our people, the ones we can be ourselves around without pretense or armor, the ones who love and accept us unconditionally. These are the people who will celebrate our victories, support us through our challenges, and hold space for our vulnerability without judgment.
Having those supportive relationships is so crucial. I'm thinking of like my close circle of friends, ones I can call at 3 a.m. with a complete meltdown, and they'll just listen, without trying to fix me or offer unsolicited advice. They're my safe space, my vulnerability cheerleaders.
I love that.
It makes such a difference to know that you're not alone in those moments of vulnerability.
And speaking of those moments when vulnerability feels challenging, remember that courage isn't the absence of fear.
Right.
It's feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
It's about acknowledging that fear is a natural response to stepping outside our comfort zones. But it doesn't have to control us. We can choose to act in alignment with our values, even when fear is present.
I love that reframing of courage. It's not about being fearless. It's about acting courageously, despite the fear. So we've talked about self-compassion, finding our people, and remembering that courage is not the absence of fear. What other strategies can help us navigate this vulnerability journey?
Another practice that can be incredibly powerful is gratitude. When we intentionally shift our focus to the things we're grateful for, it helps to create a more positive and resilient mindset.
Yeah.
It reminds us of the abundance in our lives, even amidst challenges, which can make vulnerability feel less risky.
Gratitude is like an antidote to fear, isn't it? It helps to shift our perspective away from scarcity and lack to a sense of abundance and appreciation. It's a powerful tool for cultivating a more courageous and open heart.
And finally, remember that vulnerability is a journey, not a destination. It's not about achieving some perfect state of vulnerability, but rather about showing up authentically as best we can moment by moment, even when it feels scary.
So it's okay to have moments of fear and doubt, to stumble and fall along the way. It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. The key is to keep practicing, keep showing up, keep daring greatly, even in those moments when we'd rather retreat into our shells. It's about cultivating that muscle of vulnerability one small step at a time.
This has been such an insightful exploration of vulnerability, and I feel like I'm walking away with a renewed sense of hope and possibility. It's a reminder that embracing vulnerability isn't about weakness. It's about unlocking our full potential for courage, connection, and wholehearted living.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's been a joy to delve into these concepts with you and to witness your own journey of understanding and embracing vulnerability.
And to all of you deep divers out there, we hope this exploration has sparked something within you, a desire to dare greatly in your own lives. Remember, vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a superpower. It's the key to unlocking deeper connections, more meaningful experiences, and a life that is truly aligned with your values.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a challenge. What's one small act of vulnerability you can commit to this week? It could be expressing your appreciation to someone you love, asking for help when you need it, setting a boundary in a relationship, or simply acknowledging a mistake and offering yourself compassion.
Whatever it is, choose to dare greatly. Choose to embrace the power of vulnerability. You might be surprised by the transformative impact it has, not only on your own life, but on the lives of those around you. Until next time, deep divers, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep daring greatly.